So as Dave mentioned, my name is Mo Noxheim, and I have my counterpart, Chris Webb, on the line. We're strategic sourcing specialists for CDW-G's higher education segment, working with all higher education nationally. Over the course of the presentation, we'll review best practices that we've seen from our years in working with our higher education customers through the strategic sourcing process. So within the meeting itself, we'll go over strategic sourcing and e-procurement. That'll include things like supplier identification, establishment of contracts, and then when applicable, the actual integration of e-procurement. Then we'll switch over to Chris. He'll cover the post-negotiation contract rollout, and then most importantly, the actual measurement of success that are resulting from the contracts that you've done within the strategic sourcing effort. So just to begin, I wanted to make a quick differentiation of supplier versus partner. You'll see us use both throughout the presentation, but most notably the reason why we differentiate between the two is because if you're taking the time to invest in narrowing down the number of suppliers that you're currently working with, and the suppliers have taken the time to respond to your request, they also have a vested interest in the success of your strategic sourcing efforts just as much as you do. And it really earns the title and the name of a partner versus just a supplier or vendor, like you would normally refer to them. So with that said, we'll go over the strategic sourcing and e-procurement section. We'll start with supplier identification. To us, I mean, really the best way to begin to narrow down that the long list of suppliers that you may be working with is to divide them up by commodity. You can do that by looking at some legacy, high volume spend suppliers from the last 2 to 3 years. If you gather multiple years, it should really remove any anomalies or niche suppliers that you have in the system for various reasons, whether a department really likes working with somebody or they're located locally to you, something along those lines. You'll also want to look at developing a scorecard to get feedback from the campus. Scorecards can include things like the customer service that the end user's been seeing, ease of doing business with the supplier, ease of return, response times, time from order to receipt, or like a days to ship metric. A lot of measurable results that would really pertain to, would be important to the end users who are using that supplier. You also want to look at, you're doing this to make your job a lot easier and to make the process of ordering on campus a lot simpler for the end users. So you want to look out for different capabilities. These capabilities can include things like e-procurement experience, electronic invoicing capabilities, accounts payable options, logistics, the number of available resources, how many people are actually dedicated to your institution, that type of thing. And lastly, within the supplier identification, you have your recommendations that you'll have within the RFP process, or recommendations that the suppliers will send over because they have references that they want you to reach out to. But really, you also have peers either located regionally or like-minded institutions that you are engaged with on a more frequent basis. You want to ask those folks, who are they using? What do they think about their suppliers? If there's some overlap in the suppliers that you're considering and that they actually use, what is their experience been, that type of thing. So looking at some of the peer institution recommendations is really important. You also want to look at, to get a successful partnership in place, you want to look at all of the different stakeholders that are going to be involved in selecting these suppliers. So in order to ensure that successful partnership, the key stakeholders can be IT directors, deans, department heads, whoever will be really leveraging the awarded supplier the most to ensure that you're aware of their needs and everyone is comfortable with the list of prospective suppliers that you've at least put together. You want to lay out your goals and expectations to ensure there's a mutual understanding internally so that there's a unified communication going out to the potential suppliers, and then as well, once the awarded supplier or partner has been made, there's that unified communication and everybody is on the same page. You want to make sure that those goals are both measurable and attainable, because when you're communicating the follow-up expectations, you want to make sure that you have something to actually measure against. They have a better understanding of what exactly they're going to be held accountable to as well. And you want to communicate the follow-up expectations. So how frequently do you want to meet with the awarded supplier? Who should be there? Should it be on-site? Is it going to be virtual? How frequently are they going to be on site or virtual, that type of thing. And then last and most commonly overlooked, Chris will go over this a lot more detail, but the actual measurement of success. So you have your goals and expectations that you want to be measurable and attainable. You have your follow-up communication already scheduled out, and you have a mutual understanding. But it's the measurement of success, both to the suppliers so they understand how they're doing, but so that you can report that up to your board, your dean, your director, your CPOs, your CIOs, those types of things, just to show them what process that you're going with, who you're working with, and how successful it actually is. So it's worth the time investment that you're making. From there, you'll go into the actual establishment of contracts. So you can go about this in a multitude of different ways. The first way is obviously the general RFP process. The second way is through cooperative contracts. We've had a lot of success working with cooperatives like NJPA to put together a offering that is meeting the institution's needs and goals, and still being able to take advantage of a wide variety of suppliers and contracts that are available within that cooperative. When you're leveraging a co-op contract, it is important to note that you can customize these contracts to meet your institution's needs and goals, and you have that capability. Within the contract itself, there are certain things you should be incorporating. Goals that you have established internally with other stakeholders. These goals can include things like spend under contract, number of departments utilizing the contract, number of orders or invoices, utilization rate of e-procurement, reduction in road spend, those types of things. You want to put together, a service agreement or SLA. Some examples of that can include things like response time from the account team, percent of orders that ship the same day, and then process or timeline to initiate a return. How long does it take to actually, once you've decided you want to return something, to actually return it? Another piece of utilization milestones, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but utilization rates of e-procurement, number of departments that are actually leveraging the contract, measuring the rate of adoption is going to be really important. Incorporating institutional or state terms and conditions is an important piece. Make sure that you have that either in the RFP up front, that you're explaining that to the suppliers that you're looking at narrowing down from. They have the ability then to take a look at it, understand what they're entering into in the beginning, redline it if possible, and then be able to send it back to your institution as quickly as possible. The last piece that's also overlooked, along with measuring success, is setting clear expectations on bid limits. This piece is really critical for the supplier to be able to communicate out to the general campus how their institution views this contract, how it can potentially make their buying process similar. It can help in messaging the contract. It can help in marketing it, and it could ultimately impact the adoption rate, how quickly your campus is going to adopt that contract. The last piece within strategic sourcing and e-procurement, and this may not apply to everybody, but it's the actual e-procurement integration process. So within the e-procurement integration process, you'll start with a supplier integration. Generally, it'll have a kickoff call with the supplier, the marketplace, and key stakeholders. Key stakeholders should include your accounts payable people, as well as any technical folks that are helping with the integration, just to make sure that there's no questions that are left unanswered, and everybody is understanding what exactly they're entering into. Most of these kickoff calls will have some sort of, template or kickoff call questionnaire that will be filled out. If they don't, the supplier will or the marketplace will. It's not a big deal. It's not something that you need to actually create yourself. But this is something that should be supplied to you. If you don't have that, or none of the suppliers or marketplaces have it, you want to look at defining the scope of the integration itself. And some of the most important factors will include whether or not you want to do punch out or hosted, if you want to include things like level 2, if you want to do level 2 product, level 2 store, electronic invoicing, is that being incorporated into the integration? Is it a second phase of the integration? Where does that exactly lie? And then the settlement process. If you want to do ACH, EFT, Ghost Card, P Card? How is the payment process going to actually happen? Some of the best practices in post-implementation or rollout, we go through, and I've seen a lot of institutions go through the process of actually integrating suppliers within an e-procurement system, and then we kind of just forget about it. The actual post-implementation rollout piece is really important. So looking at continuing the cadence with the supplier, to look at utilization rates, look at the errors or issues that the end users are experiencing, whether on the punch out or actually placing the orders with that supplier. You also want to look at getting feedback from the end users on the landing pages for the supplier, providing that to the supplier so that they can potentially either change the landing page based on the feedback or be able to take it back to their development team and make those updates accordingly for their broader audience. You also want to look at developing some joint marketing material. This should help with some of the utilization rates that we talked about in the last section. But you want to provide training session information. When are you training the actual end users on the marketplace itself? Answering questions. Are you holding office hours that they can either call in or come by and get a tutorial on how to use that marketplace? FAQs are really important. Just general questions that you're getting asked a lot, to be able to have that in a general FAQ file, either on the main page of your marketplace or within each of the suppliers, if there are some additional FAQs that you wanted to provide or have them create with you. Another good way that a lot of our customers have actually incorporated some of the updates that they've made within their marketplace is through a newsletter. This can be just a general, contract procurement, strategic sourcing type of newsletter, but keeping the campus updated on some of the benefits that they're receiving from using the supplier, that the experience from end users have had from using the supplier, any type of information or updates that the supplier has made to their marketplace is also a really great place to put in that newsletter. So it's just a way to get the communication and messaging out to the campus. This will tie into the continually adding value to your e-procurement marketplace. Addition of level 2 search capabilities. So if you don't have certain capabilities in that initial integration, keeping the campus updated as far as when additional functionality is being made to the campus, to the marketplace itself, available for the rest of the campus. You want to look at potentially highlighting premier suppliers. So if you have 2, 3 different tiers of suppliers within your marketplace itself, highlighting those that you really value to do the business with or you prefer that your end users use the most, differentiating them from the rest of them. Providing campus updates and supplier improvements. We talked about that in the newsletter itself. Highlighting technology standards. We have a great way, and most suppliers should have this capability of highlighting standards within their landing page to make sure that the campus either understands what the standards are or will at least be able to easily find the products that are being highly recommended for the campus to actually use. You also want to look at some of the other manufacturers that maybe you chose not to integrate with or don't integrate with currently. Establish a partnership with them. Look at some of the potential resellers that you have within the marketplace that are actually integrated, who work with those manufacturers, and look to move that spend over to those resellers so that they can go through e-procurement. We've had that happen in a couple of instances with manufacturers like HP or Lenovo. Cisco is another big one. So if you have that partnership, or if that reseller has the partnership, or you have the partnership with the manufacturer, you want things to be moving through e-procurement because that's the campus's preference. Look for some of the partners that they have, that you have mutually, and be able to move that spend over through e-procurement. So with that said, I will go ahead and move it over to Chris to talk about the post-negotiation and contract rollout.
Great, thank you, Mo. So as all of you are aware, it requires a significant amount of time, resources, and effort to implement new contracts and new supplier relationships. As a result, it's equally important to collaborate with your strategic partners, kind of post-contract rollout, just to help drive contract utilization and growth in the overall partnership. The first step to accomplishing this is to build a marketing plan with the partner. That allows you as the institution to really accomplish 2 things. It helps you direct and control the types of activities that your strategic partners execute on your campus. That's really important because you know what's going to work best based on the culture and based on previous experience. The other area that it ensures is that the partner's message is in line with your own internal messaging and how you want to promote certain contracts, certain relationships, and certain initiatives that you've initiated on within your institution. When you're building a marketing plan, some things that you can focus on, first and foremost, would be on-campus events. There's a lot of different types of events that you can hold throughout the course of a fiscal year. One can be vendor showcases. This is an opportunity for you to invite all your strategic suppliers onto campus to really meet and to network with all the various end users for their products and services. This can be geared towards a particular type of commodity like technology, or it can be general and can be an open showcase for all commodities and all suppliers. Another area are quarterly summits, and this is something that we're invited to participate in fairly commonly. On the technology side, the CIO will typically hold a quarterly meeting with all the IT directors from an institution, and it's an opportunity to really talk about the major objectives, the initiatives, and some of the challenges that the institution is facing from an IT perspective. Our role in those is not a contributor, but it's more of a participant. It gives us a chance to sit back, to listen, and to learn. And then as we identify maybe some of the challenges that are being faced on campus, we can then follow up the appropriate individuals that are the leads for those initiatives and can provide some recommendations on how we can add value and help moving forward. Kind of the final type of format for an on-campus event is a lot of people refer to them as one-to-many events. These are events on campus. Typically, the supplier will rent out a room and really coordinate the entire event. If it's a new supplier relationship, this could be a great opportunity for that supplier to hold a one-to-many event to kind of announce a new relationship, the new contract, and the value that they can provide within the portfolio of products and or services that they offer. If it's an existing relationship, one thing that we do very commonly is we'll hold an event on campus around a very specific subject that's of interest to the community. So, as an example, in the technology space, desktop virtualization is one thing that is really hot within the higher education space. Not a lot of institutions have moved forward with that type of technology. So we'll bring in some of our subject matter experts, our solution architects, to deliver just a general education on virtual desktop infrastructure, the solutions that are in the marketplace, the major players, and some of the routes that can be followed to have a successful implementation. So those are some ideas for on-campus events that I think help provide some visibility to your strategic partners and provide some value back to your end users. Anytime you're coordinating on-campus events, I think it's really important to build out a calendar for the upcoming fiscal year, just because you and your partners will get busy. And if you can set a schedule, it ensures that there's a constant cadence on campus and that partner is continually getting in front of the right individuals to help grow the relationship. But it also conversely makes sure that communication doesn't happen too often where it's almost overbearing to campus, because that will have an adverse effect on what we're both trying to accomplish. Anytime, I think it's important to leverage existing communication channels that exist within your institution. I know some channels that we've certainly leveraged in the past are using campus newspapers to get out to all the various faculty and staff on campus. We'll leverage mail stops and do a direct mail campaign to those very specific individuals that would be appropriate to our portfolio of products and services. We'll leverage email distribution lists, messaging on the central procurement website, and if you've invested in e-procurement, I know there's a splash page that's integrated into most of those e-procurement marketplaces where you can do specific announcements for your key suppliers. In most cases, it's not a single channel that we'll leverage. We'll leverage multiple channels just because that will give us the greatest probability of hitting the target audience. And in most cases, I know most institutions will either have a director of communications or a campus communication department. It's really helpful to work with those individuals to really understand what those channels, where those channels exist, the best way to leverage those channels, and I think most importantly to collaborate and to refine the message so that it certainly delivers the right content, but it's within the general messaging guidelines of the university or college. Outside of that, I think it's really important, as you collaborate with your suppliers to share data. As a supplier ourselves, one area we struggle is to truly understand the market potential within your institution for our products and services. And we certainly have a firm grasp on the business we've conducted historically, maybe some gaps in the business, but it's really difficult for us to quantify or to know how we rank against our competition. As procurement professionals, we certainly understand and respect that it's your goal and it's your role to promote fair and open competition. As a supplier, we want to earn that business and win based on providing the greatest value to your college or university. So with that being said, certainly we don't ask or advocate that you provide competitive data to your partners to help them be more successful, but instead I think you can provide very general information just to give some guidance on where there's potential for growth in the relationship, and that can lead to positive idea sharing, whether that's, it's just collaboration to help that partner grow their relationships on campus. And I think really the impact for you, the positive impact, is that it can help you target rogue spending on campus, transfer that to one of your preferred contracts, and if you've made that investment in procurement, it converts a lot of those kind of legacy ordering methods, whether it's paper PO, whether it's P-card, and converts it to e-procurement to leverage the source to settle efficiencies. So I'll discuss some specific examples later on what type of data you can share, and I think that will probably help identify, specifically where you can collaborate with your partners. With any successful strategic relationship, I think it's important to maintain just a consistent cadence throughout the year. One thing that we do is partnership or business reviews with our most strategic customers. And really the frequency of those conversations, that's really dependent on the age of the relationship and how important that relationship is to your college or university. Typically we'll do them quarterly, biannually, or annually. In a lot of cases, when it's a new relationship, we'll have formal quarterly conversations just to make sure that we're discussing things that are going well, opportunities for us to grow the relationship, any challenges that come up. When it's a much more mature relationship, we'll move those maybe to like a biannual review, just because we've laid the groundwork and it's set up to be a successful relationship. So when you look at these partnership reviews, some things that we recommend reviewing with your key suppliers is, look at the spend history, look at the trends, month over month, quarter over quarter, year over year. If you're seeing growth in that relationship, which would be expected, it's telling. It's the data that helps you understand that it's a successful relationship, that the contract's effective, that the messaging to campus is effective, that the supplier is providing the customer support and, achieving the SLAs that were a part of that contract, and the result is obviously growth in the overall relationship. If you're not seeing growth, or if the growth is minimal, then it's an opportunity to discuss that, for you as the institution to maybe give some education to that supplier on either things that aren't working well and need to be changed, or maybe some additional things that supplier needs to do to provide that level of service and to be successful within your campus. Another area that I think is important to review is just the savings that are being driven as a result of the contract. And I'll talk a little bit more about this as well, but very similar to spend. If you're collaborating with your suppliers, if you're doing a lot of the things that Mo touched on earlier in terms of driving demand management to technology standards, working with that partner on some of the larger volume opportunities that exist within the various commodities, you're going to see growth in the overall savings percentage under the contract. And that's a positive certainly for you because it helps impact in a positive way the bottom line. And it's also good for the supplier because it means that they're having the opportunity to inject additional value into the relationship and to really prove that we're here to be a strategic supplier and to help each individual in each department with their individual goals and objectives. Finally, if you're certainly in the technology space as well as other commodities like MRO, life sciences, in many cases you may not be contracting directly with a manufacturer, but instead with a value-added reseller. In those cases, I think it's important to understand, the portfolio of products that they can offer to you under contract. What are you buying? What is it from a product perspective, a manufacturer perspective? It helps you understand, if you're seeing success in a given category, you can ask the questions why. If there are certain gaps in the offering, then it's a good open conversation that you can have with the supplier to understand maybe why they aren't growing the relationship within that specific category. Maybe it's an education issue. Maybe it's a lack of service. Maybe it's just lack of communication on campus. But in any event, you can have that conversation, understand why you're not seeing the type expected growth in the relationship and address that moving forward. As you can see, everything is about maintaining an open line of communication. Whether it's using data to have that conversation or whether it's direct feedback from your campus and users to let your key suppliers know how they're performing. One thing that I hear a lot when I ask the question to our customers is how CDW is performing. A very common answer that I hear is, well, we haven't heard anything from the university and users, and no news is good news. I completely agree with that sentiment. But I think if you're consistently hearing that, one thing that might be helpful both to you and to your suppliers is to actually get some objective feedback on the supplier's performance. Some of our customers will once a year issue a survey out to the university, poll the end users on their top 5, top 10 suppliers, and it's, rate them on a scale of 1 to 10 on how they're performing. Provide some open-ended feedback on whether things are doing extremely well. We hear very often that we're providing quick turnaround on requests, great customer service levels, great turnaround time. But one thing we'll ask, it's what would you like to see additionally from, this supplier? And one thing we will hear pretty commonly is we wish that, our account manager would be more proactive in providing education to us on certain trends in the technology industry, so that I'm in front of those, can understand what's coming down the pipeline, and I can plan for that. So when we receive that type of feedback, we will alter and provide some additional services to campus, whether it's via webinar, whether it's via those one-to-many events I had mentioned earlier, and we'll provide with subject matter experts some just general education around certain trends in the technology industry so that IT directors can learn and can plan accordingly. But that's something, if you aren't doing that today, I would definitely encourage you to do that because it will definitely help get some just subjective feedback that will help grow the overall relationship as you move forward. So the last piece is to any successful relationship is measuring the success of that relationship. And I think it's important to note that every institution is going to be a little bit different. It's going to have, slightly different goals and objectives and different ways that you can measure, the success towards those objectives. I know Mo talked a lot about setting goals early on in the contracting process, what the relationship should look like at, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 5 years from now. I think that's really important to outline that. And when you have the partnership reviews biannually, annually, that you really take a look at those goals and those objectives and you see how you're tracking against them. So how do you do that? These are a couple of examples that we've seen. So the first is around, e-procurement. So for those of you that have invested in e-procurement, I know that's a lot of the larger institutions within higher education. One thing that you should be looking at for all of your strategic partners that are integrated are what are the utilization rates for that partner within the e-procurement system. If you've got a strong partnership and that partner is doing the things that they should be doing to help drive utilization, what you should see is certainly a larger percentage of the spend and a larger percentage of the order volume is flowing through e-procurement versus some legacy methods like P-card or paper purchase order. Now, I think certainly the goal on your side and the partner side, because of the source level efficiencies, would be 100% utilization. We have achieved that with a couple of our customers, but I think what you can do is really say 1 year down the road, 2 years down the road, this is where we'd like to be percentage-wise. And what you should see is that month over month, year over year, quarter over quarter, you're seeing a higher percentage of your orders flowing through that e-procurement marketplace. And if you're seeing that, there's certainly efficiencies and savings that are being recognized on both sides of the relationship. If you're not seeing that, it's a great opportunity to assess why, to talk about maybe some of the challenges and some of the things you're going to do to correct that moving forward. If you haven't invested in e-procurement, and I realize there are a large number of institutions that have not made that investment yet, you can do a similar thing, but instead look at contract utilization. Look at the spend that's going through the contract. If you're seeing growth in that, that's a positive thing. It means that the contract is working. If you're not seeing growth in the partnership, definitely something that you can address and to understand why. Another area that you can look at are the number of end users that are buying through that contract. I know we have capabilities of identifying specific individuals and departments that are buying through our contract. If the contract is successful, if the marketing efforts that we're doing jointly are being well received on campus, more people are going to understand about the relationship, about the contracts. They're going to start using them. You're going to see growth in the spend under contract. You're also going to see growth in the number of people that are using those contracts. And that's something I think that you may not always have the data for that, although you can pull it through some P-card reports and things of that nature. But you can definitely ask your partners to provide you with that information because that is accessible in the partner community. The last area is around savings, and I know we talked a little bit about this earlier on. Again, I think a key to anytime you're collaborating with your strategic suppliers, and you're trying to figure out ways to grow the relationship, to inject additional value, you're asking your partners to come up with creative ways to be more relevant to the university or college. At the end of the day, you're going to see a growth in the savings. I know at CDW, we take a look at the savings and we look at kind of our standard education list price, and we compare what you paid versus what you would have paid at our standard education list price, and you get a savings percentage as a result of that. If we're developing technology standards, as Mo had mentioned earlier on, we're able to drive certainly behavior towards those standards. Those standards are typically going to be well below standard contract price because of the projected volume and efficiencies, economies of scale that result in that, and that's going to increase your savings percentage. If the communication to campus is to work with the preferred providers on larger projects, on volume purchases, again, as a reseller, and I know this exists in other commodities as well, when it's a volume spend opportunity, we have the ability to go back, to work with our manufacturer partners, to obtain additional savings that could be passed along to you under contract. That's going to grow your savings percentage. So those are things that when you really take a look at the savings, the data will tell you how effective the relationship is. If you're not seeing strong growth in savings, it's probably because there's not a lot of collaboration with your partner. You're not doing strategic things like demand management to standards that make sense for your campus. Or maybe you're not seeing a lot of, legacy business that's occurring, that's rogue spend. You're not seeing that move over to the new contract where there's guaranteed discounts, guaranteed savings, things along those lines. So it's an opportunity to really understand how you can collaborate with your partner and see positive benefits and financial benefits moving forward. So with that, I'd like to open the line to any questions that you may have based on the content of today's conversation. And again, want to thank you just for the time that you spent to learn a little bit about strategic sourcing.
Okay. I'm getting a number of private questions from some folks, and just to reiterate, you will get a copy of this PowerPoint. Everybody that logged into this will be receiving a copy. And so, yes, you will get all the slides, just so to make that crystal clear. All right, the next question, is there any software available that can assist in tracking savings?
That's a great question. I'm personally not familiar with any software application that's designed to specifically track savings. I know just from talking to peers at other organizations and different commodities than what CDW represents, they do very similar things where, we'll provide reporting to contracted customers that compares, based on an established benchmark that we've agreed upon based on the relationship. They'll provide reporting that says, here's what you paid, here's what you would have paid at our education list price, or maybe there's a different benchmark that's being used and agreed upon. But I would encourage you just to work with those strategic suppliers, either through partnership reviews or through quarterly reporting. You should be able to get, a lot of the data that's needed to give you sort of that baseline and that benchmark that you're looking for. One, to report up to the CFO to help them understand specifically what type of savings are being driven because of your efforts. And then two, to have that baseline knowledge to know as time evolves and the partnership evolves, are you actually seeing an increase in your overall savings? But if I do come across a specific software app that would aid in those efforts, I'll make sure to communicate that back to NJPA and NAEP.
Okay. All right. The next question. My institution has, and it says quotes, my institution has a unique set of terms and conditions that need to be part of our contractor relationship. How do I do that, or how can that occur when I'm using a co-op contract with separate in their own T's and C's?
So I think that could be a conversation that even Dave could help with. But, essentially looking at the terms and conditions with the specific supplier and seeing if there's a way that the supplier, that co-op, and the institution itself can all work together to get those terms and conditions incorporated. Oftentimes we will set up what's called a piggyback agreement so that those terms and conditions are met. It's for that specific institution, and the co-op contract and pricing and their process is actually being leveraged.
Yeah.
So I would say
and again,
the short answer would be to start with the supplier itself that you're interested in working with.
Okay. And Mo, to your point, we at NJPA, we get that rather often, and they're happy to know that they can add their own specific and unique T's and C's, and we see that it's sort of on an increasing basis. More and more people have a circumstance that they feel they need to write something in. So again, our contract allows for that, and we see it regularly. All right. Okay, here's another one. What do you do with a supplier that overlaps in multiple commodities?
So that's a great question, and I think it really comes down to your specific goals as an organization. I know one, and I'm going to use technology again as an example. Our catalog is technology in general, and we have a portion of our catalog overlaps with maybe contracts that you're executing with your office supply companies. So in those cases, some institutions, they have a sole source contract with an office supplies company, and in those cases, we can accommodate and we can make sure that that portion of our catalog is not visible, to your end users. In other cases, and I think this is probably the more common one, institutions say, we've got a primary or a preferred contract with a Staples as an example, but we'd like a secondary kind of supplier. So in the event that they're out of a particular product and it's an urgent need, we have a secondary source to be able to access that. And in those cases, we would just obviously include those items within the scope of our contract. So, again, it really comes back to your institution, your goals, what you've done from a contracting perspective. And, at that point, it's really up to you to determine what type of direction you'd like to take with your partners.
Okay. All right, and the next one. My institution really isn't comfortable sharing detailed information about end-user spend or competitor information. How do we still work with a supplier on driving adoption towards their contract?
So I would say, going back to Chris's section, it would really be looking at not necessarily the granular details, but if you can, hide the innocent and label it supplier A, B, C, this is what their spend looks like, or this is the department, they're spending X number of dollars off contract. Can you have a conversation with them, or, this is an area that you can really capture some additional business like we've been talking about through our partnership reviews. But it's really up to you and how comfortable you are in the amount of information. It's not necessarily the specifics that we're looking for. We just, in order to make sure that we're going after the business or have that opportunity to go after the business, it's looking at some of the generalities that you could provide to us.
Okay. That's the questions I've received so far. So, folks, this is your last call for questions. If somebody has one, please get it into me. Okay, and while we're waiting for that, I guess to conclude this, we want to thank you all for being on. We especially want to thank Mo and Chris from CDW-G and NAEP, Doreen, the entire NAEP staff, and especially Melanie Freeman to make this all possible. Again, I'll remind you once again, the webinar will be archived and available both on the NAEP website and on NJPA's website. You'll be getting your continuing ed credit certificate via email, as well as a link to the evaluation survey. We invite you to do that and tell us if you found value in this session. So, seeing that there aren't any further questions, I want to thank you all and have a great rest of the week.